Hello everyone. I'm going to do a tutorial today different than I've done before. We're going to make a fairy outfit or an elfie outfit for this little baby. She's just my size baby. This is Destiny by Sherry Williams. She is my model for how big to make it. So these are the parts we're going to make it. We're going to give her a pair of like leotard tight type things out of this leafy green. And then we're going to give her a little tunic out of this and a matching hat out of this piece of remnant. And then we have some flowers and leaves and stuff to throw on when it's all done to accessorize it. And all of these will match these little wings that will fit across her back. So that will be the full outfit. All right, so first we're going to start with cleaning off my cutting surface. These are just leaves that I have collected from the years of my scrap collecting. This is one chunk of remnant that is about 20 inches long that I got from Joann's in the remnant section. I don't know what the top of it looked like at some point, but this is what I've got. This is enough to make 2 little tunic tops. So we're going to cut it right here so that there'll be 5 petals at the bottom of her tunic. So first we're going to cut it up that side, trying to cut it between these two so that we don't end up ruining the shape for the next tunic. Alright, so there's one gone. Now that we have this piece, I'm going to fold it in half so that it's easier to cut straight. And I'm not using any patterns, we're just kind of using the baby and making it as we go. When this is on her, I want it to hang about mid-thigh. So we have to cut it up a little bit past her shoulder so we have room to do the hemming and shoulder seams. So we're going to mark it about her ear level just so we have some extra room to play with. And I'm going to fold that. Alright, so that's what we're going to work with. This little piece will be her hat, and this little piece will be her dress. Okay, so this is going to be similar to a pillowcase dress. This will be the bottom of the dress, and this is what we're going to turn into her elfie hat in a little bit. So we want this to be mirrored in the back so that the seams are always up the back of the dress. We want to overlap this little center seam at the back so that it'll take into account the seam allowance. All right, so this is what we're going to work with. This piece is the front, and these 2 scallops will be at the back. Now we're going to cut this in half so that our cuts are the same on each side, and we're going to give her some armhole slits. Okay, so that's where her arms will sit. And now we're going to come back over the top. And we're going to cut in a neckline. Now we're going to gather that so it's not some big loose neck. Now you can kind of see it'll be gathered up here in the middle, and it'll be a little tunic for her to wear. All right, so that's that finished cutting out. Now we're going to move on to her hat. All right, so we have to figure out which is the stretchy with this particular fabric, and it looks like it's evenly stretchy no matter which way we do it. So we're going to use our baby again. We have to make sure it fits her head, and we're going to have a seam allowance at the front, so we want to make sure it has plenty of room and it's enough fabric because it covers at least half of her head. And now at the top of the head, so we're going to have this little piece right through here will be the top of her hat, and we can downsize this as we go. We want it to stick up like a little elf hat. But she doesn't need all of this space because her neck isn't that big. So we're going to come in here and modify the neck area to be a little more fitting so that her head will fit back here and the point will stick up. This will probably be a little bit big when we're done, but we'll downsize it a little bit as she needs it. Okay, so that should fit for the hat. I'm going to line this, but not yet. I have to go find another chunk of fabric so that it will stay up and pointy, probably with a piece of felt or something. This is what we have left, and I can use it for booties or another smaller tunic or a sleeve for something, so we're just going to set it aside and not use it yet. So we have our hat, we have our dress cut out. Next up, we're going to have our stretchy, tight fabric. This is crushed velour. I really love using this stuff for tights. It makes really nice fitting tights. This piece has been used for other things, so we're going to nice and stretchy this way. So if it stretches this way, that means we want it to be the long way going this way, so it fits around her waist stretchier. So we're going to open this up. Try to get it nice and straight. And I want it to actually hang off her toes quite a lot so that I can put a point on it. All right, so we're going to start our panties way up here so we have enough room for her waistband. I'm going to cut it over to that edge. So this is our panty chunk. And again, we have really points. You have to pay attention to where the shortest piece is on that. So my point can only go down to there. So I'm going to cut the fabric at that point so I don't accidentally think it's going to be longer than that. Make sure we're all the same length. And I want to give her enough crotch space so that it doesn't make her look like she's got a bit of a wedgie. So there's our crotch, there's our armpit seams, and this is our length. So we're going to go from here and that will be our grand length, but we don't need that much on the outside. So we're going to get rid of some of that as a pointy edge. I'll come back in and perfect my point. Alright, so now we have little pointy feet so that it'll fit her like little shoes with points at the tips. And we have a seam down this side, so we want to mirror that so it doesn't look ridiculous when it's sewn. Alright, so here is the overall look. You can kind of see panties in there. And it looks really wide and tight, but when you start sewing, if you put it to be so tight that there is absolutely no wiggle room, then your baby they end up too small for your baby. So there's going to be a little bit of bag at the top as we cinch it up, but as it comes down the leg, it'll actually fit her nice and tight. That'll allow it to go over her little diapers. Okay, so our basic pieces are finished. Now we're going to move over to the sewing machine and go from there. I forgot to cut the lining out for the hat, so I have 2 squares of felt that matches my green leggings. So when it's seen through the hat and through the little holes, it'll just match and look like it's part of the outfit. And you won't really see it too much, but it'll help keep the point. So I'm going to line those up. I'm going to line up one of my hat chunks. And we're going to just cut it out. Alright, So now we're officially all cut out. So now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine so we can carry on from here. Okay, so I'm going to start with a hat, and we line up the hat with the right sides on the inside of the hat. So we have our decorative pattern on this telling us this is the right side of the fabric. We want those sandwiched inside out, like the hat is turned inside out completely. And then we're going to line it on both sides with the felt. I'm only going to tack it in a few places just to help it from holding, or to help it hold itself together while I sew. Now I'm paying attention in here because that just tells me there is a little bit of a difference between where the edges line up. So I want to make sure that I take an account for that when I'm stitching it on the machine so that I can capture all those blades in there. So that they go in about 1/4 of an inch at the fattest part. So I need to make sure that I sew at least 1/2 inch in on the top of the hat so that I can catch that spot. I'm using a gray thread for this because I don't exactly have this colored green, and gray really blends in with the green. I'm going to try to keep it nice and even so it's not bumpy and lumpy as it comes down. Right here at the face, I'm going to double stitch it so that it doesn't come undone. Flip it around and go up the back of the hat. And this touches the edge pretty much all the way there, so I don't have to be quite so careful about that edge. Okay, so we're going to snip that, take my pins out and get ready to flip it over. Alright, so we have to prepare this to turn itself right side out. So when it's inside out, all of this fabric is going to want to be on the inside of this point. And as you can see, there's more out here than there's room for it in there. So we have to trim this up a little bit to make room on the inside of this hat for this point to be nice and pointy without it being too stiff and not able to take all the stuff that's going on the inside. All right. I'm leaving this on purpose, kind of rough edged around the hat so I can finish it with leaves and flowers and make it what it is. I have a crochet hook or a needle pointy knitting wand walkie doodle. I'm going to get to the inside pointy. You have to be careful when you use super pointy things because if they're too pointy, they'll go right through. All right, so there's our cute little hat. We're going to come back on top of it and do some stitching to hold it in place, and then we'll put some leaves and flowers and various things on the top of that to finish it off, so that it will be all cute when it's done. So we're going to set this aside and move on to the next piece. Okay, so the next part we're going to sew is our little tunic, and we want to get this and flip it inside out so that we can stitch along the back seam. I'm going to set my machine to sew on the left side of the presser foot, so it gives it a little more seam allowance. It came unthreaded on me. I'm going to stay stitch that. I switched my thread to black for this so that it's not visible with the lighter gray. Stay stitch the end. Alright, so that gives us back our little tunic top. Now we're going to stitch the shoulders. I'm going to flip it over and do it 2 ways or both directions just to make it nice and secure. And with elf clothes, you don't necessarily have to be as meticulous with your seams. If you want it to be a little unfinished, kind of raggedy, then it's okay to do that, more so than it is when you're making human clothes. You want those to have finished seams and no strangly bits of thread. But this, as you can see at the bottom, it already has kind of a tattery look, so I'm not too fussed about the overall edges. So there is our overall tunic. Now we're going to switch to some elastic. And I'm going with black elastic for this so that you can't see it. And I'm going to use this right at the edge of the neck. I'm going to go not quite from shoulder to shoulder, starting about an inch below where the shoulder is. I'm going to secure this on at first with a straight stitch, just to keep it in spot. And then I'm going to make it so my needle stops at the bottom. Then I'm going to switch my machine to zigzag and give it wide spacing and wide zigzags. And I'm going to pull this tight as I sew right over the top of the elastic. I'm going to keep that right at the top, 1/4 inch or so from the top edge. Tight as the elastic will go. Until we get to about the other part of the shoulder that's even with where we stopped. We're going to just take it back to the straight stitch and secure it onto this side with a straight stitch back and forth. Alright, so the back of the dress is all gathered up. The front of the dress we're going to do a little bit differently because I want it to gather up a little bit more than that. So I'm going to sew a pocket onto the front of the dress that I'm going to weave the elastic through to make a casing so that I can make it tighter on the front of the dress. So we only need it to be about 1/2 inch. So that's where we're going to stick it. We're going to switch it back to the left side stitching. I think you could probably use this with pretty much any fabric. This is just a little more decorative, so it will make it look more finished, even if it's not got finished edges on it. Whereas if you did cotton, it would have the little strayed seamies at the bottom. So I'm going to hunt down my safety pin and my black elastic. I'm going to weave this through the casing I just made. And when it gets to this side, I'm going to stitch it down. Two or three times just to help it hold itself in so it doesn't accidentally pull out. Cutting off all my stringy bits. And removing my safety pin. Now that gives me a whole casing filled with elastic. So now we're going to cinch up the elastic until it's as tight as we want it. And then we're going to finish off the other side. You can do this on the back too if you want it a little more tight. It might have been smarter with the back, but as long as you have a decent hole for your little head to go in, it should be fine. And that looks like it's about right. All right, so we're going to snip this off. All right, so we have our little tunic dress. We can add some flowers and stuff after we're done with the pants. They're kind of silk flowers, so they're hard to stitch on, so I'm going to use fabric glue and glue them onto some of these little scallop edges. All right, so the dress top is done. Now we're going to come to the pants. And we're going to use the serger on this piece, which is loud, so forgive the serger. Helps if I turn it on. Keep it lined up as you go down. And crushed velour in general is kind of slippery. It likes to pull itself apart, and there's like a direction to it, and it never likes to stay put. And this isn't the worst stuff that I have. When it's the more slippery it is, the harder it is to stay put. Okay, so the outside seams are done. So now we're going to do the inside seams. And I would do it this way, but when you start with a pointy spot, there's not really a whole lot of ability to catch it without it bunching up. So I'm going to raise my needles, slip this under there like it's been sewing all along, and then sew away. I'm going to do this in 2 directions, one going this way, and then we're going to flip it around and go back the other way. Raise my needles up, overlap a little bit. If you don't have a serger, your normal sewing machine can do the trick. It just leaves it a more finished edge when you do have a serger. And we're going to come over to our string, grab one of the strings, and give it a good yank to make sure it's all finished off at the bottom. Sometimes it's hard to find the right string. All right. Eeny, miny, moe, pick a string. All right, so that will make it so when I snip it down lower, it won't unravel on me. There we go. All right, so now we're ready for the waistband. We're going to fold it down. I have a 3/4 inch waistband I'm going to put in it, so I need to make sure I have a big enough hole to stuff that through. I'm going to do like a 1 inch fold over, start on the edges. Got the dark thread on here still, and I'm just going to leave it. I hope it doesn't turn out too visible. Actually, I think I'm going to switch it. Oops. All right. So on my sewing machine, there's lots of little grooves for me to try to figure out where I'm going to sew. And I'm going to use the left side, the needle on the left, and then I'm going to just line it up with a mark on my bobbin case. I'm not paying attention to this side. I have to line it up on that side, and if it's straight on this side, it'll be straight going around the edges. I'm going to go right over the top of my old seam, which may make some people cringe, but I do it because I don't like having to fill in the hole when it's done. So I have a different method where I hide the seam that covers or that allows the elastic to go in a different spot so you can't see it. All right, so now we're going to take our pins out and get ready for elastic. Snip off our stringly bits that drives you crazy. All right, now we're ready for elastic. So I'm going to hide the elastic right at the edge of the seam where it connects to the side piece here. We're going to weave it through this hole, and then we're going to stitch it shut in a spot where you can't even see it that it was there. So now we have our elastic. I'm going to hook my safety pin through it again. Now I'm going to weave it through the pants without cutting it at all. We don't want it to flip and roll over inside the waistband, so we're trying to keep it nice and flat. Okay, so now it's back out. This is where we measure so that we know how big we want our little pant hole to be. So this is how big I'm going to make it. And I'm going to pull these tight so I can give myself some room. I'm going to sandwich these together so that it's more flat. And stitch this pretty good. I just kind of make a little box around the outside of it, and it holds it flat so it doesn't buckle up inside of the waistline. Okay, so our waistband is done. Now we're going to pull it back inside the waist of the pants, making sure it stays nice and flat. Covering up our hole. Now we're going to send our hole down through this machine and stitch that hole shut again. And this is right in the seam, so you can't really see that it's there. Now we're going to repeat that on the other side after we get the pants evenly elasticed on both sides. We're going to go to the other side. This helps it from having the waistband roll inside of the waistband line, which is annoying. So we're just going to stitch it down to keep it nice and flat when it's being used. Alright, so our little pants are done. We're going to flip them right side out now. We want nice and pointy points. Alright, so our little pants are done, our shirt is done, and our hat is done. Now we're going to go make sure everything fits. and then we'll start adding our topical accessories. Okay, so now we have the basics done. Now we're going to try it on her to make sure everything fits. We're going to start with our little pants. Perfect little fit. It doesn't go up to her armpits like Urkel, like we measured it to look like it was going to. And it's a little loose in the back, so I think I might have to come and stitch it up a little bit just to make it not so loose. Our hat. It's a perfect fit. So now we can move on to the next step, which is finishing it up and accessorizing it with our topical stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to try to tighten this up in the back so it's not quite so loose on her head. This is inside out already. So I'm going to match the shoulder seams with one another. So that tells me where the center back is. And then I'm going to come put a stay stitch right at the top. So I don't have to sew all the way down and lose some of the scallop. This will tighten it up. And now I'm going to flip it right side out. It becomes kind of a plate pucker. Almost like it was meant to be there on purpose without having to tweak it. So we're going to go over this a few times back and forth just to hold it tight. Alright. That should be a nice tight neckline for her now. Now we're going to start working on how we're going to add the accessories. Okay, so now we're going to accessorize the hat and stitch different layers in place through the accessories. So this is where you get to use your artistic freedom. You can line these up and do a whole border with the leaves going up and over the hat. You can put just a couple leaves on and a flower. I found some of my leafy trim, so I'm going to add a row of this up and over the hat. And then I'm going to add a little leafy trim at the corners and a flower to help pull in the pink in the wings. So that's what I'm going to do. But this is where your artistic personality gets to come through. I've changed the thread back to gray since it matches the gray or the green on my leaves better than the dark brown. I'm going to do my best to go right up the center of this leaf column. And this has a slight wave to it, so it's not entirely the easiest maneuver. Just do your best to try to stay on it. Now I'm at the center of the hat, so I want this little section to fold flat as I go over the top of it to help it to lay flat on the baby's head. first layer down, I'm going to stitch the leaf petals on, and then I'm going to glue the flower petal on. So we need to measure where we want this. I think that's about right. So I'm just going to do a little button stitch right at the taps of these so that they will stay put, but still be a little bit loose. I'm going to tack them in 2 or 3 spots just so they stay put. There really isn't a reason to snip these other than that I'm a little anal perfectionistic. Your flower will cover all this stringy bits. So we're done with this side. Now we're going to go over to this side. As I have things falling on the floor. Alright, so remember the front leaf is on top. I'm going to duplicate that. This one goes about 1/8 of an inch from the front, so we're going to make sure it doesn't go any farther back than that so they're even. And the last measurement is at the bottom, so this one goes close to the bottom of the hat. Oops, I got turned around for a second there. I really like using different mediums to add to different clothing outfits. It just adds more depth to the outfit and makes it more realistic feeling. Okay, so now we're going to prepare that for the flower that's going to sit on top on both sides. And we'll do that in the other room, but I'm going to get the shirt and we're going to accessorize the shirt for a few minutes before we move on to the flower part. Okay, so now we're going to accessorize our little dress. We have 5 of these scallops on it, which means we have 5 points up the centers. So in order to kind of tie it in with our hat, I'm going to sew this stuff right down the center between it. And then I'm going to stitch on 2 leaf petals right at the bottoms. And then we're going to come back and glue a flower onto each of these scallopy parts. So I'm going to do that off camera so you don't have to have a 10-year-long camera session, and then I'll show you when it's done. Okay, so we're done adding our little leaf trims. Now I'm going to put it back on it really quick so I can figure out which flowers I want to put at the bottoms. Our tightening up the neck worked well. It's nice and tight for her. Actually, I think I put it on backwards. Look at that. Special. There's your armhole, chicken. All right. All right, so that looks really cute. And our little hat. That looks really cute. Now we're going to try to figure out what flowers to use to accessorize this with to help them match the wings, which goes with the outfit. So I have a big giant bucket full of flowers and more flowers, and then some extra flowers and different kinds of flowers. And so I pulled out some that I thought would be cute on here. I really want to pull in the pink on these wings to help give it a third main color. So I have found a couple options, but first we're going to start with some of these that are already the same color, and they look great too. I'm not entirely convinced that there's any one thing that would look terrible on this. Even if I didn't want to go with the pink, I could pull in some orange and make it a kind of a nice little fall color. And these are just little yarn flowers that I bought off of eBay in a giant lot. So that was really cute. Cream, I think, looks really, really cute. I even thought about doing the little real flowers, which looks really, really cute. But I think I really like the way these little pink, it's about the right color pink to go with the wings. And I like how they look pulling in that extra color on the baby. So we're going to take these to the machine and stitch these on. There's going to be 7 of them, 1 on each scallop and then 1 on each side of the hat, and then we'll tie on the straps, and then her outfit is completely finished. All right, so before we start sewing on our flowers, I'm going to stitch on our ties. This is just a piece of the green ribbon, and it's not behaving very well because it's so skinny I can hardly hold on. I folded it in half to give it a little extra anchor strength, and then I'm going to center it right underneath my needle and put a buttonhole stitch right on it. This will be hidden from the flower when it gets put on top. Okay, now we're going to come to the flower side of things. My top thread is white and my bottom thread is gray. And I'm going to make my flower have the 2 petals touch the bottom and 1 petal point up. So I'm going to put buttonhole stitches on each of these petals just to hold it still. So I'm going to go through this whole hat, doing both sides and every flower at the bottom of each of the dress scallops like this, and trim up my edges, and then we'll come back and put it on her one last time. Okay, so now I am done. I have put all the little flowers and all the little leaves all the way around. I'm going to put it on her one more time and see how she looks with the wings. This is an outfit that I will be selling. This is just the baby that I'm using to make it, so I know it fits this kit. It will also probably fit a few other bigger elf kits this size. Oh my goodness, how cute is that? So cute. All right. Did they match the wings? Yay, yes they do. Now, in order to get these wings to actually stay on, I have to stitch on magnets right onto the back of her body, because these 2 pieces are magnetized. So as soon as that's on, she will be able to sit and have her wings on her at all times.